In Game of Thrones, the biggest secret of Eddard Stark is the paternity of Jon Snow. He says that Jon is actually his bastard son, fathered during the time of Robert's rebellion. There are many theories as to who Jon's mother really was, from a woman named Wyla to the hauntingly beautiful and mysterious Ashara Dayne of Starfall, sister to Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, whom Ned killed. But in reality, at least in the show version of events, the books are still unclear. Jon is not the son of Eddard Stark, but instead his nephew. Secretly, he is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, a fact that Ned has kept hidden from everyone, even his own wife, despite the tension and disdain that comes due to Jon's presence. Jon's parentage is a secret that Ned literally takes to his grave. But what if in a change of events, he didn't? What if in some other world, Ned had actually decided to not bear the cross alone and told his wife Catelyn the truth about Jon? Now, Ned telling Catelyn that his son is actually his nephew isn't something that would happen immediately, like when he gets back home from war. When it comes to the scenario, timing is very important, and by the time Ned gets back home from the rebellion to Cat, it's important to note that the two of them barely know each other at this point. They got married pretty much last minute after Ned's brother Brandon died. Ned then went to war for about a year before coming home, and at that point he and Catelyn are still pretty much strangers to each other. So if Ned wants to tell her the truth, it would be sometime later, after they've grown to know and love each other, so Ned could feel comfortable revealing such a secret to her. There would be a couple things that go into Ned wanting to tell Catelyn the truth, the first being his mindset, or to be more specific, the weight of carrying Lyanna's secret on his own for years. In canon, Ned kept the massive truth about Jon to himself for over a decade, so it wouldn't be surprising if at some point it started taking a toll on him mentally, and he wanted to be able to confide in someone else. Another thing that could push him to tell Catelyn about Jon is her treatment of his nephew. Seeing how his wife treats his nephew with disdain because of the belief that he's a bastard could be some motivation for Ned. Jon didn't ask to be born, or to be put in Ned's lie. As the son of his sister, in this timeline, he thinks he deserves better. He deserves some kind of mother figure instead of ridicule for something he had no control over. So, some years after the rebellion, but before the main series starts, Ned pulls Catelyn to the side. He takes her to their chambers where they can talk in private, and at this point their relationship has grown enough for Ned to be comfortable with telling her the truth about Jon. When she first hears it, Catelyn will be skeptical and disbelieving, most likely thinking that Ned is just trying to cover for himself and get her to ease off of Jon. After all, who would believe that at first glance, Jon Snow was a secret Targaryen? But as time goes on and Ned doubles down, things would change as he brings up some evidence. Like how hair color isn't always synonymous with one's lineage. Most of Ned's own children, from Robb to Rickon, look like Catelyn and not Ned. But do you see people implying that they're actually bastards and not trueborn Starks? Wouldn't Catelyn be furious if someone ever tried implying that? Not to mention, there have been cases of Targaryens in the past having dark hair, like Prince Duncan the Small, the oldest son of King Aegon V. His mother was a Blackwood, and when he was born, he took after her when it came to his appearance. Dark hair and dark eyes. But do you see people denying his parentage? Of course not. Or what about Steffon Baratheon, the father of Robert, Stannis, and Renly? His mother was a Targaryen, but he and all his kids also have dark hair. But if that's not enough to convince her, Ned can always bring in Howland Reed, since he was also there at the Tower of Joy and could corroborate Ned's story. The truth of Jon's parentage would definitely cause Catelyn to pivot when it comes to her relationship with Jon. For years, she despised him for being a bastard and a potential threat to her children. In the books, Catelyn is kind of scared that one day Jon will grow up, get married, and have kids that would one day try to oust her family from power, especially since Jon looks more like a northerner than her own kids. But with the knowledge that Jon is not Ned's son, and the entire time she's been bullying a child, her husband's nephew, who lost both his parents, would change how she treats him moving forward. And this what if is going off of the show, so we're going off of the show version of Catelyn, who already expressed some level of sympathy over how she treated Jon, even without the knowledge that he wasn't Ned's bastard. So for this Catelyn to find out the truth, it's almost guaranteed that there would be some change in dynamic here. She would treat Jon better and kind of adopt him in a way, like she said she would do when he almost died as a baby.
So I pray to all seven gods. Let the boy live. Let him live. And I'll love him.
Though I will say it would be a bit of a pill to swallow for her knowing that they were harboring the son of Rhaegar Targaryen this whole time. But even with that being said, while Catelyn has made some rash decisions under pressure, I don't think that at this point she just rat out Jon to Robert or something like that, since at this point there isn't anything for her to gain from it. And with the knowledge of the truth, I doubt she knowingly wished death on her husband's nephew and forsake his promise to Lyanna by exposing him to the king. Some people would notice Catelyn's change in attitude towards Jon, though, and be somewhat curious about it, but I doubt people would try digging into why she had a sudden change of heart. There may be rumors and some questions, but Ned would shut that down. Like he did in the books when people started asking who Jon's mom was, and people started speculating that it was Ashara. And outside of that, on the surface level, Jon really isn't that important of a person to other people for them to make a big issue about his treatment at Winterfell. So for the most part, I don't think there would be much trouble to start out with. Moving on though, this could have some drastic effects on the story of Jon. If Catelyn accepts Jon early enough in his life, like when he's still a child and most vulnerable emotionally, this could vastly change the trajectory of his life. For a long time, while Jon was raised in Winterfell, he felt out of place. He was raised with the Starks, but was never seen as a Stark. He had to live every day of his life knowing that there was a divide between himself and his supposed siblings. This feeling of not really belonging is what drove him to join the Night's Watch. That's where all the outcasts are, and he felt that maybe he could actually belong somewhere if he went. Catelyn definitely fed into that mentality for Jon, as she made sure to let him know he was never welcome at Winterfell. But in this timeline, with the weight of Jon's secret and the knowledge that he isn't really a threat to her children or her husband's affair baby, she's more inclined to be better than she was before and take him under wing. If Jon is raised more like a Stark and a member of the family, and as a mother figure in his life instead of being ostracized at every turn, he may not feel the need to strike out on his own and join the Night's Watch, with a better position in the family even though he will still remain a bastard. That being said, I believe the general plot of Season 1 stays the same even with Catelyn now knowing the truth, though there are some tense moments in the story, like when Robert rides north to meet with Ned. During the feast, I see Catelyn sending Jon away from the rest of the family like she did in canon, but her motivations are different this time around. Before, it was because she felt that he didn't have a place with them. Now it's fear that Jon could possibly be discovered in some way. It's an irrational fear, I would say though, because Jon doesn't have any striking resemblance to Rhaegar, and if he does have any similarities to Lyanna, that could easily be attributed to Ned as her older brother. Catelyn's concerns could possibly just be people asking questions, like why would they allow a bastard to not only eat with the main Stark family, but the royals as well? It's those possible inquiries that do cause Catelyn to put Jon at a distance at certain times, despite her endeavors to treat him better. But outside of that, I still think things will go the same in Season 1 for the most part. Ned will still be named Hand of the King, Bran will get pushed by Jaime land in a coma before his father sets off to the capital with Sansa and Arya. And as I said earlier, Jon will still remain at Winterfell thanks to his new treatment via Catelyn. Ned will still die during the events of Season 1 though. I don't believe I see things changing in that regard. He still finds out the truth about Joffrey and tries to expose it, he's then taken prisoner, and with Ned taken prisoner, the North rises up in retaliation. In canon, Jon wanted to fight with Robb, but his vows and friends of the Night's Watch prevented him from doing so. But in this timeline, having not gone to the Wall, Jon has no vows or friends, since he never met Samwell Tarly, Gren, or Pip. He also never met Jeor Mormont, who gave him Longclaw, so no Valyrian steel sword for him either, unfortunately. So with no ties to the Watch, he does what any loving son would do and fights to get Ned back. And when he dies, he fights for revenge and independence with his brother Robb. He's one of the first to kneel and call his brother king in the North when the time comes. I think the War of Five Kings would have the most potential for possible changes, given that Catelyn knows Jon's secret now. Catelyn Stark is known for making rash and foolish decisions when she's under pressure, and one of her most infamous choices was the release of Jaime Lannister, the only and most valuable piece of leverage that her son had over the Lannisters. I think it's important to note that this wasn't exactly a spur-of-the-moment situation. Catelyn's choice to release Jaime was rooted in fear and stress. Her husband died, her son was crippled, 2 of her children were being held hostage in King's Landing for all she knew, and her son's best friend betrayed them and took their family home. She was desperate for some kind of win, which is why she released Jaime in hopes to get her daughters back. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm sure we're all thinking about it. Catelyn knowing the truth about Jon is honestly just a powder keg waiting to explode knowing her. But I don't see it going boom without some justifiable reason that pushes her to that extent, like the War of Five Kings. Once Robb crowns himself king and continues the war, it sinks in for Catelyn that at this point in time, they either win or they die, and they need every advantage possible. Catelyn loves her children, and the pressure of losing all of them, her eldest son, her younger sons, her daughters, could compel her to want to make some kind of drastic decision, or at least consider one. When facing the Lannisters and the threat of possibly facing either Stannis, who is a seasoned commander, or Renly, who has the Tyrells on his side, I could see the idea floating around in Catelyn's mind to reveal the truth about Jon. Now, the reason I say she could is because Jon's secret moving forward and being exposed largely depends on who Catelyn believes Jon is. Let me elaborate on that. Does Catelyn think he's a secret Targaryen prince, or a secret Targaryen bastard? Does she know that Rhaegar married Lyanna, or believe that they were just some random fling? It's important to know that Catelyn's information on Jon mainly stems from what Ned knew. At the very least, he knew that Jon was the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna. But beyond that is a question mark, because we don't know if Lyanna had enough time to tell Ned everything about their relationship before she died. So Ned could know Jon is legitimate, or he could believe that he's a bastard born out of passion, or a bastard born out of SA, since the common belief is that Rhaegar assaulted Lyanna. And if she died before she had time to clarify, then it could be reasonable that Ned believes the same thing too. Just that Lyanna cared enough about Jon, despite the circumstances of his birth, for her to want her brother to keep him safe. These variables are things you have to take into account when discussing Catelyn's moves during the war. Because if she believes that Jon is a Targaryen bastard, I don't see her saying anything. Bastards are looked down on a great deal in Westeros. They're seen as less than dirt by most people, and it would be really hard to rally people to his side if that was the case. Sure, as the baseborn son of Rhaegar, he would have a better claim to the Iron Throne than someone like Joffrey, who's a pure illegitimate Lannister. But what about people like Stannis and Renly? They also have Targaryen blood through their grandmother and ancestor, Orys Baratheon, if it's to be believed that he was actually Aegon the Conqueror's half-brother. It's that Targaryen blood that allowed Robert to claim the Iron Throne, but unlike Jon, despite not being direct descendants of Aerys or Rhaegar, they're actually legitimate nobles in comparison, so their dragon blood would probably carry more weight than his. If that's the case, rash as she may be, I don't think Catelyn would pin her hopes on revealing Jon. This would be different if she knew the truth. Say Lyanna had enough time to tell Ned this before she died, about the marriage, the septon, and he relayed all this to Catelyn. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, Lyanna did tell Ned before she died what Jon's real name was, and that was Aegon Targaryen. And that fact does kind of imply that there is some level of legitimacy when it comes to Jon, because he doesn't have a typical bastard name, like Water, Snow, or Sand. Those are names given to illegitimate children. But if his name is something like Targaryen, it does insinuate that there was an official marriage that took place at some point. So we can actually roll with the fact that Catelyn does know that Jon is a Targaryen prince as the son of Rhaegar. If that's the case, then she might be more willing to say something about Jon's true parentage, but I do think that she'll hold back for a while at least, for a couple reasons. The first being honoring the memory of Ned and his promise to Lyanna. Ned basically took Jon's secret to the grave and wouldn't want his nephew to be used as a pawn in a war. Not to mention, revealing the truth about Jon could put him in danger, put a target on his back because people could see him as a threat, as a claimant to the Iron Throne. The second reason why Catelyn might not want to say anything at first is her own feelings towards Jon as well. After learning the truth in this timeline, she took him in, treated him like family, and I don't think it's far-fetched to say that at some point she began seeing Jon like her own son. She already hates that Robb is fighting in a war and has made himself king of the North and is risking his life. Doing the same thing to Jon, making him not just a political figure, but a known threat as a claimant to the Iron Throne, might rub her the wrong way as a mother. But also as a mother, she's still willing to do rash things if it means protecting her family, like when she released Jaime in hopes of getting her daughters back. And I think I know a good way to have Catelyn come to that same conclusion when it comes to Jon and revealing his secret. It happens in Season 2 after Catelyn meets with Stannis and Renly. Everything at this point has pretty much gone the same. Robb is still fighting for independence. He strikes up a deal with the Freys to marry Rosalind. Theon then asks Robb to go home to get the support of the Ironborn, and this is something that his mother Catelyn is not happy about. This is one of those moments where Catelyn is very stressed because she doesn't trust Theon's dad, Balon. And I believe it's one of those moments where she does contemplate telling Robb the truth about his brother Jon. In her mind, it's a brief thought. If they can prove Jon is the true-born son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, people might flock to their side and they may not need to risk the support of the Greyjoys. After all, there are still some Targaryen loyalists out there. but it's also one of those moments where she decides not to say anything precisely for the reason I listed earlier: proof. As of right now, they have no way to really prove that Jon is Rhaegar's son, so getting support would be pretty difficult. But an opportunity does arise later on. After meeting Stannis and Renly, there is a key change to Catelyn's story after receiving the bones of Ned from Littlefinger. When Catelyn gets Ned's bones, a thought crosses her mind as she stares at the remains of the man who loved her. This could be Robb. This could be all of her children if they lose the war. This could be the Stark family unless she finds some way to get more support for Robb to help him win. In her grief and anger at the death of her husband, in her desperation to make something happen to save her family, outside of giving up Jaime for her daughters, she asks Littlefinger for a favor. She knows he has connections, some of which that may even be unsavory. So why not use that to her advantage? This decision isn't made out of trust, by the way. At this point, after betraying Ned, she really does not trust Littlefinger or a thing he says at all. But she does trust and know that for a fact, he has been obsessed with her for years. And right now, she thinks that she can use that in some way to help out her son Robb and his cause. She tells Littlefinger that if he wants her trust again, her favor, he'll do this for her. Littlefinger will say that he'll do anything for Catelyn. I don't think it's that far-fetched to say because this man will still hold out hope that Catelyn loved him after all these years, even after he helped get Ned to the chopping block. So if Catelyn asks him for something and he thinks for a second it could help their relationship, I think he'd do it. Catelyn will tell him that she wants him to use his sources to get information from the Citadel, specifically to find records of Rhaegar's marriages. This would be the annulment of Rhaegar's marriage to Elia and his union with Lyanna. Things we know the Citadel actually has evidence of thanks to Season 8, where Sam found the documents and told Bran about it. Littlefinger would be curious why she wants info on Rhaegar, but she'd basically tell him not to ask questions and send him off. Catelyn's whole plan this moment after seeing Ned's bones is to find a way to expose Jon and get more support for Robb. She is definitely doing a coin flip with someone like Littlefinger though, because if he finds the documents, who's to say that he won't destroy them and feign ignorance like there was nothing there to begin with, or give the information to someone else and put a target on Jon's back. It's definitely a dice roll on her part, but considering that in canon she let Jaime go with the promise that she'd get her daughters back, even though there is no guarantee that the Lannisters would ever follow through on that deal, I could see her doing the same thing here, given her emotional state. And her choice to do this is only reinforced after the death of Renly. Renly seemed to be the only peaceful option here out of the Baratheon brothers. Robb doesn't want to give up being king of the north, from what we know, and really seemed to be the only one willing to let Robb remain a king in title with the promise of fealty in return. There was some kind of peaceful agreement to be made with him, but that's different with Stannis and the Lannisters. If Stannis somehow wins and takes the Iron Throne, he will retaliate against Robb and focus his forces against the north and find some way to punish her son and maybe even kill him. And if the Lannisters beat Stannis, now they can focus all of their efforts on the north too and kill her son as well. But if Jon were to become king, that could be a different story. If he took the Iron Throne, he could ensure the safety of the North and the independence that Robb desires. That fear and hope is what drives Catelyn's decisions, and with the Tyrells in the wind after the death of Renly, she also sees another opportunity. If she can expose Jon as the rightful heir, there is a chance that she can lure them to the North's cause. Back during Robert's rebellion, they supported King Aerys. So there is a chance that they might support his grandson as well. But first, she needs proof, and most importantly, to tell Jon everything and get him on board with the plan. Now, this may sound like a decent plan on paper, but it would still be very difficult, to be honest. Even if she did get evidence, would people really be inclined to believe that Jon is the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna? Especially when Jon has no obvious Valyrian features, and there's no concrete proof of relation to the Prince Rhaegar. Sure, there may be a record of Rhaegar's marriage to Lyanna, but there's no real record of them actually having a kid together. Some people may just dismiss this as a northern conspiracy to claim the Iron Throne for themselves instead of independence. The truth in this case would just be subjective, like how Joffrey is a bastard, and that truth has been exposed to the masses. And yet, despite that, there are still those who believe that Joffrey is the trueborn son of Robert Baratheon. So some people may believe that Jon is actually the rightful heir, while others may see him as nothing more than a bastard if he has Targaryen blood at all. But regardless, Catelyn is going to try anyway. Anything to help her children. So she makes her way back to Robb and asks for a moment alone with him and Jon. Catelyn then reveals the truth that she and Ned kept for years. Jon is not a Snow, he's not even a Stark. He's a Targaryen prince and his mother is Lyanna Stark. It would be a shocking revelation that neither Jon or Robb are keen to believe. Catelyn says she's working on getting proof as they speak. She'll mention how Littlefinger is trying to help her, and then Robb will get angry because of what he did to Ned. He'll ask how she could trust him, and say that even if it is true that Jon is Rhaegar's son and a claimant for the throne, it would just put him in danger. Catelyn will then retort and say that they're all in danger. Every day they are, and if they don't do everything they can to win, then they're all dead. This sentiment does make sense for someone like Catelyn, considering that it is something that she told Robb when the war first started.
If you lose, your father dies. Your sisters die. We die.
So, there's some tension in the Stark family because of this, and Jon is left feeling even more uncertain of not just his place in the family, but in the world in general. His entire life he believed that he was a bastard and did everything to live up to the image of Eddard Stark, only to find out that he was a Targaryen the entire time. He was the grandson of a monster, the son of a man who helped start a rebellion, and the man he thought was his father played a part in the destruction of his real family. It's a lot for him to deal with, but when they're alone, I imagine Robb will tell Jon that no matter what's true, Stark or Targaryen, Jon will always be his brother, no matter what. The two of them hug it out after that, and things seem fine for a bit. Later on, they do receive word that Theon has betrayed the Starks and taken Winterfell. I do believe that this is something that would still happen in this timeline because Robb wanted ships and already sent Theon back home when Catelyn was away with Renly and Stannis. Jon will offer to go with some men to take back Winterfell from Theon, but Catelyn won't object, wanting to keep Jon close until she gets the records from the Citadel. Catelyn wanting Jon to stay, though, would raise some eyebrows. Remember, it was Roose Bolton who originally told Robb that Winterfell had been taken. So to see her advocating for Jon to stay and putting so much value on his life, it would cause him to question why she's acting like that. But regardless, he won't pry on it and would just offer to send Ramsay after Theon instead, like he did in canon. So the Boltons do end up taking Winterfell back, but like before, Bran and Rickon are nowhere to be found. The Starks then make their way to Riverrun for the funeral of Hoster Tully, and this is where I see a big change happening. Remember, while at Riverrun, Robb had a plan to kill the Mountain, Sir Gregor Clegane, who was terrorizing the Riverlands courtesy of Tywin Lannister. Edmure Tully, Robb's uncle, failed to execute his plan by pushing the Mountain instead of drawing him out like Robb wanted so he could be ambushed by their men. With Jon around though, he's basically the guy that Robb would trust the most in this conflict. The two of them have always been close, and I imagine that during the war, he would be Robb's right-hand man before anyone else. So I think instead of Edmure, it's actually Jon who's in charge of attacking the Mountain and drawing him out. Knowing their relationship, Jon would follow Robb's orders, vague or otherwise, to the T. He would draw out the Mountain, and as per Robb's plan, Gregor Clegane would be ambushed by the Northerners, led by Jon, and killed. The Lannisters would lose a valuable asset, and I can't help but see the arguable justice in a move like this. Jon basically avenges the death of his father's wife and his half-siblings Rhaenys and Aegon, and this also kind of feeds into one of Cersei's lines in Season 1.
What harm could Lyanna Stark's ghost do to either of us that we haven't done to each other 100 times over?
Well, he killed the Mountain, and by doing so, basically ensured the survival of Oberyn Martell, since he won't have to fight him in a trial by combat. Now, if the Starks are smart enough, they can send Gregor Clegane's head to Dorne, since they are still very upset about what he did to Ellie and her kids, in hopes that maybe his head would win them some kind of alliance with the Dornish. But aside from that possibility, in addition to things that I see being averted here, I also don't think that the Red Wedding happens in this timeline. There are a few things that went into that in canon, like Robb breaking his oath to the Freys, killing Lord Karstark, and the release of Jaime Lannister. However, in this timeline, I don't think Robb would break his oath to Rosalind Frey. And the reason I say this is because of his brother, Jon. Jon is a person who follows their father Ned's philosophy to a fault, to the point where he can't even lie in the show. I think his constant presence and reminder of their father Ned would have an effect on Robb that prevents him from marrying Talissa or entering a relationship with her. He'd essentially be a compass for Robb, basically being there to do anything and everything to keep his head on straight. I also don't think that Catelyn will let go of Jaime in this timeline either. Releasing Jaime was her Hail Mary attempt to hopefully get Sansa and Arya back. But now, her desperate plan to win the war and save her daughters is Jon, not Jaime. If she's pinning all of her hopes on Jon and him becoming king, she may keep Jaime in his cage and hold him for a rainy day. And if Jaime is never let go, Lord Karstark won't kill the Lannister squires as a misguided form of vengeance, which prompts Robb to then kill him as retribution and justice. So as a result, Robb has a bigger army, and with Jaime still around, the Lannisters will feel less inclined to pursue a brutal tactic like the Red Wedding. And with a bigger army, the death of the Mountain under their belt, leverage in the form of Jaime, and the marriage pact with Rosalind still intact, the Freys may feel less inclined to accept the Lannisters' proposal if Tywin still wants to go through with the Red Wedding anyway. If the Red Wedding doesn't happen, and we assume that Arya's journey with the Hound goes the same here, then she'll eventually be reunited with her family at the Twins. Now Catelyn's main concern is getting her daughter Sansa back from the crown. And at this point, I'm gonna say she also starts wondering if making Jon king is still the right play, given how everything seems to be going well for them at this point. She has her daughter back, Robb still has a big army, they have Jaime Lannister still held hostage, everything is looking up for the Starks. So maybe they don't need Jon to be king. Maybe there's actually a chance that they can do this on their own. But whether they can or not, a letter does arrive for Catelyn at the Twins from Littlefinger. It contains the information about Rhaegar's marriage that she was asking for. But even with the information in her hands now, a part of her feels unsure. And she's even a bit worried. Littlefinger now has access to the truth about Jon. A thought that gets more terrifying with the appearance of Arya at the Twins. Reason being, when Littlefinger first appeared to Catelyn and gave her back the bones of Ned, he lied to her face and said that the Lannisters had both of her daughters, Sansa and Arya. But now with Arya showing up at the Twins and telling her mother that she escaped when the Lannisters first took over, it really puts things into perspective for her mother. Littlefinger is willing to do anything, even if it means lying to the face of the woman he supposedly loves. So who knows what he'll do with the information about Jon? So there may yet be some cause for concern for the Starks. But that's where I'm going to end the video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed my latest brainchild, and I'm eager to know what you guys think down below. After all, there's usually no one way for these stories to play out. Still, I enjoyed thinking this one up. It's not perfect, but I enjoyed it all the same. And if you guys have any thoughts about possible changes you could have seen happening here, feel free to let me know down below. For now, though, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more, and I will see you all next time.